Hey guys, I never intended this to become a political channel in any way, but as the world seems to be falling apart, I'm seeing a lot of parallels between the events that are occurring and the way metal has evolved, the way art has been digested, and what tends to be the lasting remnants of what art is now as opposed to where it started. So, if you're from the United States, there is a trial going on that seems to be pretty clear cut in terms of whether or not there is guilt or innocence. And I'm not going to get into the details of it, but one side of the argument is fighting based on video footage, testimony from witnesses or people involved in the event, and the other side is fighting based on symbolism and emotional appeal. And that side also seems to wield a lot of cultural power currently. And the trial, which should be pretty clear-cut, is in its third day of deliberation because it seems that the jury is being pestered and knows that there will be repercussions if they don't side with the will of the mob. And that's what this video is about. It seems as though people, when they get a lot of like-minded people together, they tend to fight based on ideology rather than reality. And a lot of the stuff that I bring up in my videos whenever I'm critiquing a band is based on the objective merit of the artist and the product that is being presented. And I know that there's always been people that are saying there is no objective merit, it's just in the eye of the beholder, and I've dissected that many times in all of these videos. But those that view things as just purely being in the eye of the beholder are going to fight for the ideology and the symbolism behind their products rather than the objective merit, which is what you're seeing going on in this trial. People get so fueled by symbolism and the desire to have the crowd behind you that it becomes this vicious mob of people that will not see reality for what it is. And as much as you try to lay out the argument, this is not put together well. This composition has no actual structure. You can list all of those reasonings and showcase why these segments don't connect and obtain a knowledge based on that there is no actual thought from the artist for towards the product they're putting out. There's not an innate motivation to the creation. There's just a bunch of superficialities that are putting out the riffs that might be cool, that might actually be clever, but when you look at the arrangements and you look at what the entirety of the record is telling you, you're seeing that there's not a message there. And when there's no message there, you just have the superficialities that will endure. And people are really good at latching onto superficialities and not understanding subtext. And the reason for that is because there most often isn't any. And that's especially true for modern output. So when enough people view that scenario and can't be deterred from the facts of the objective reality of a faulty product, they're going to obtain more people like them and try to get a mob behind them to make themselves feel as if they have an actual argument, when having a bunch of idiots that have the same viewpoint isn't an argument. It's just a bunch of non-arguments that are backed by force. So when people come at me and they're like, well, you're clearly wrong. I mean, look at your ratio. I feel good in that because I know what that means. I know that it's very rare for people to actually showcase the realities of things and have people back it. But it's very common for people to ignore the realities of things, champion their own tastes, fight for a symbolic argument, and then get the mob behind that. And the reason for this is because people, as I've stated in this channel before, are, for the most part, very average or below. Most people are just automatons. They just do what they have to do to get the reward that they need, then go to sleep and do it all over again, and try to eschew responsibility as much as they can until they get caught. And there's no actual, there's no goal, there's no motivating goal to go past that. There's no reach for a greater you. Because the ego is showing you that you are all that matters, and you just have to keep feeding yourself. There's no reason to transcend. So what a lot of metalheads will start to realize, that life is the diversion, and looking towards a greater goal or understanding the things that transcend what you are the non-diversions. And people that are average will look at music as the diversion to their life. They'll look at art as the diversion. And what they're doing actually matters to them, when in reality there's nothing really there. So in order to actually get above average, and I don't mean like skill level, I don't mean whether or not you've honed your craft in terms of like the technicality of your product, I mean above average, meaning you are looking at something greater than what the average people are looking at. To be above average, you have to seek something further than yourself. And most people are incapable of that. And you end up seeing these products that are being pushed as having depth to them because there's technicality involved or there's dexterity involved, and that to them is above average, but it really is just skill that's wrapped around a very average mindset. That average nature of people, whether or not you are decorating it with above average skill, is still going to be average but louder, average but faster, average but more technical. It's still all average because it's an average mind that put it together. So you end up having people grab onto that averageness that seems above average, and they try to latch onto it because it will give them depth in their own minds. It'll make them feel like they're better than they are, but it really is just innate averageness. And if there is anything that is actually above average, they will take that and try to bring it down to their level and destroy it. They cannot handle the idea that there is someone that is seeking transcendence in any way. They're going to have to destroy it because they feel that they have a leg up on what actually means depth in an art form, because they've latched onto something that they like on a superficial means, and they've tried to derive some kind of depth from it when it isn't really there. And you end up having this scenario where a bunch of people that are driven by ego and are wounded by the idea that there are greater paths to take, they'll maintain a mob, and they will dictate what is popular, and they'll dictate whether or not other opinions can be heard or said. You have that with the trial going on right now. You have threats of violence and rioting going on if the reality of the situation is the path that is being pursued. And if you choose to go the symbolic route or the ideological route, you're going to avoid the threat of violence and the threat of rioting. And the people that have the chance of perhaps having that perception that is above average, usually out of self-preservation, will choose to self-censor. And you won't end up having people that are willing to stick their neck out for the idea of any kind of transcendent value. So you have this happening right now in this trial. You have this happening in every essentially every art form, especially in modern metal. You'll have people defending all of the symbolic attributes of an artist, whether or not it's the skill level, all of that, all of the superficialities will be championed, but the reality of the product that you're hearing, whether or not it's message-wise it's empty, whether or not there's actually motivation and passion from the artist being delivered, or whether or not there is an ambitious full scope that the artist is trying to deliver, all of that doesn't really matter as long as you're ticking the right boxes for an audience to kind of grab onto superficially. And when enough people determine that that is what is valid in a musical experience, all of the other differing opinions aren't going to matter, and they're going to be silenced right away. So it really is going to take a lot of people to turn this tide. It's going to take a lot of people to resist that mob mentality, go against it, and try to showcase that there is other layers to what you're experiencing that you're ignoring based on your own biases. And the best way to try to get past all of that desire for that social stature is to look at each thing that you're consuming on as objectively as you can. Try to take yourself out of the equation and try to understand what the artist is presenting. Don't look for you in the product. Look for the artist. Try to determine what the message is there. If you're not hearing one and you're just seeing the product of a lot of labor and practice, then you're going to have to reevaluate whether or not this person is actually an artist or just a workhorse, because there's a difference between that. You know, if you have someone, if you're in construction and you have like an architect that has designed a building and they have a purpose for each part of the building, the people that are constructing it, all of the workers behind it, are going to have all of that meticulous labor under their belt, and they're going to put it together, and it's going to be fucking difficult. But they don't have the heart and message and the idea that the architect has. They're not going to have the motivation to ensure that each aspect of that building is going to be suitable for the greater whole. And the people that are going to be toiling away at putting it together, they're going to obviously have a lot of physicality involved in the project, but there's not going to be heart there. There's not going to be a grand design there. You need to have that attachment from an artist's perspective in order for that to be there. Otherwise, you're just a worker bee. And that's what a lot of these people that are running scales on their guitars, calling it riffs, that's what a lot of it is. So we got to try to resist the mob. And I'm very intrigued by where this trial is going to go. I feel that based on how people are, I feel like people are going to look out to save their own skin, and the ideological symbolic route is going to be what wins out. But we'll see. It's definitely an interesting one to watch. But if you are consuming a product, if you're looking at a record and you're trying to establish what the record is, and you're seeing a bunch of reviews talk about what the album is, they're going to be talking about the superficialities of it, but they're rarely going to be talking about what the message of it is. And all of those superficialities will gain momentum, and you'll see a lot of people parroting the same ideas. You'll see the fan base parroting those ideas in comment sections, and then you'll see this bias that is already going to be presented to you before you could actually consume the product. It's important to try to resist that and just try to understand what the product is, because that mob has already created a fan base for the product you're about to consume. And you have to look past that. You have to look past that to see what the reality is as opposed to what the ideology is. It's very important if you want to try to get an actual experience that is delivered from the artist's perspective to you out of what you're doing. And that's hard. That's hard for a lot of people to do. Most people, like I said, are looking for the escape. Remember that escape it's fleeting. You don't want your music to be an escape. You want your music to be an understanding of an artist, and you want it to be the idea of transcendence. Transcendence beyond escape. Escape is fleeting. Transcendence is something that is beyond just the normality of what you have to deal with day to day. Transcendence is the real escape, and most people are afraid to even think about approaching it. So that's what we're looking for. All right, well, thank you for listening.